Good afternoon, everyone. We're so pleased you could join us today. I'm Laura Sheridan, Cadalyst Managing Editor. Today we're pleased to share the stage with OnShape, a PTC SaaS business. Mike LaFleche, also known as the Professor, is a Channel Technical Services Manager at OnShape. Today he will be interviewing Lucas Lappe, co-founder and head of product at Doris Dev. Doris Dev is an online product development team based in New York City with a Hong Kong-based manufacturing team. Join us as we find out more about how this fast-paced design and manufacturing team has implemented better data management practices into their product design workflow and the resulting benefit on innovation and speed that they have experienced. Please type any questions you have into the Q&A section, and we will answer as many as we are able to. Thank you, Mike and Lucas, for joining us. I'll pass the mic to you.
Hey, welcome to today's webinar on CAD data management, advancing your product design. And I'm really excited for this particular webinar because we have one of our great customers, Lucas from Doris Dev, joining us. So we're going to have a grand old time talking about how they're using OnShape and talking about some of the workflows and capabilities of OnShape. We'll flash some stuff up on the screen. You're going to have some tips and tricks that you'll pick up. So I think, you'll learn really how to best organize your company, based on what you see here. I think it's really interesting and fun to talk with customers about how they've gone through and set up their system and what they're how they use the system. So let's just go on and get started. And by the way, before I roll off and intro Lucas here, I want to make sure you ask any questions that you have on your mind, right? So use the questions panel in the GoToMeeting software, and I think you will have the best experience possible because you can have your questions answered. All right, let's get into what we wanted to talk about here today, and we'll bring up cloud native capabilities of OnShape here that promote business agility, right? So that's really what I wanted to bring to the forefront today is how cloud native applications they generally have a large footprint in the minds of cloud native companies. So let's talk about that. We'll also talk about the new ways of working that cloud native abilities provide, and we'll go from there. So Lucas, welcome to the webinar.
Mike.
I am so happy to have you here. Why don't you say a little bit about yourself and your company, and we can go through your product development process here relating to OnShape and anything else.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Let's see. Doris Dev, I'm head of product at Doris Dev. My background is in mechanical and design engineering. I lead the product team here at Doris Dev. We have about 7 engineers at the company. And then we have 2 industrial designers as well that are all in OnShape. We are split between New York and Hong Kong, and we help brands design, engineer, and manufacture their products. We're about 30 people between the 2 offices, and so a relatively small part of that is the product team, and then the other 20 or so people are part of the operations, project management, sourcing, and quality teams that enable our clients to build their great products. We work with a ton of great brands. Check out our site, check out our Instagram. And we also own our own brand, which is called Canopy, which is a humidifier and diffuser brand, where Doris Dev effectively is both the client and the product owner.
Nice. So what's the website again, just in case people want to check you guys out?
It's actually doris.dev or dorisdev.com.
Okay, great. Yeah, definitely check it out. There's lots of cool images, different products up there. It's really a pretty cool site. So, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the images here on the screen. Do any stand out as some of your favorite projects that you perhaps have worked on in the past, or it has any fun stories, surprises, anything that pops out at you there just by looking at the images here on the screen?
Yeah, I mean, I love the Canopy products because I get to, conceive of them, design them, and engineer them. So when we look at the bottom row here, that is the Canopy diffuser, and that was a really quick to market product that is a waterless diffuser, so it doesn't create mist like most of the other diffusers. It actually just uses evaporation, so they're really easy to clean. There's no mess. You don't have to refill them. They last for a long period of time, and you don't have to worry about the fragrances, dispersing into the room and maybe um, getting diffused across the surface. If they're not evaporating, you end up with kind of a gunky layer on a table next to you or something like that. So what's great about that product is it's a lot of fun to develop. We made it really, really quickly. I think from concept to selling in market was under 5 months.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so it was really quick. We got to use an existing design language that we had already had in place. We built off of a lot of the same architectures that we had built with the previous product. And I think the engineer and designer were working on the same CAD the entire time. There wasn't actually a design to handoff. It was both the designer and the engineer working on the same CAD model at the same time,
Yeah, makes things
ensuring
easier
that
for sure.
there's proper parts stack up and all of that. So it was a very fun opportunity to work on that product.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I'll have to check them out. That sounds like a good product for my household. It's so dry in here right now. So um, the focus of this particular webcast today is about the cloud native abilities that promote business agility. It sounds really good. I got that from a friend of mine, so I can't claim complete credit over that alliteration, but it's something that I think is a good way of explaining what cloud native tools will do. And Gartner, who's a well-known industry analyst company, right? They're known for the Magic Quadrant and things like that. Um, they say that this, in this decade, right, cloud native technologies are providing users with the latest languages and platforms that enable proper digital transformation, right? So, you're able to do things in a different, newer way with cloud native technologies that you might not be able to do similar things with traditional desktop or on-premise install applications, right? So it's something that I really want to focus in on today. And there are many different examples of cloud native applications out there. These tools are some of the tools that you use, right, Lucas, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I use Slack, constantly. I mean, I'm in Google, Docs and things like that constantly. You mentioned one called ClickUp, which I just did a little research into. Is really pretty cool, actually. It's kind of nice amalgam of different tools. And of course, OnShape is another example of pure cloud native. You notice what I kind of left out some things that are kind of partly cloudy, out of this slide, right? When I say partly cloudy, stuff that requires an install or deals in files being transferred or passed off between one and another without a kind of integrated sharing system, right? And that's, to me, what I think is a cloud native system. If there are no files and there's nothing to install, those are like my top two things. But what do you like about cloud native applications in your company, Lucas? Why have you decided to use tools like this?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, agility and is probably the biggest reason behind it. And we'll start with that. I think, what's really important for us is we're able to work really closely together across a lot of different teams. And losing files is like just a problem that we can't deal with. And so, working with cloud tools has enabled us to share files across teams extremely easily and enable us to onboard team members really, really quickly, where file structures are pretty simple. Task management is pretty simple, and showing a history of both files and communication is really important and has enabled Doris Dev to grow very quickly and work with a really wide range of customers because of that.
Like, let's say you had to bring on a new employee for a project that you just won, like, and you needed to hire somebody into your organization. Like, how long do you think it would take to get them up and running with these 4 tools?
I mean, what's great about it is they all have search built in. So one, if you know what you're looking for, if you know what project you're working on and you search, you're going to find likely the file you need. You may not even know where it is at that point. You're not even required, someone doesn't have to train you to find that document. And another great thing about it is you're able to preview almost everything in these platforms. So you don't have to wait for a file to download, then open it and preview it and know it's the right or the wrong file. So it allows us to get team members on projects, day 2 effectively, and definitely by week 2 at the company, they're part of a team and they understand the document flow and they understand the workflow.
Yeah, I remember when I first joined OnShape, and I'd come from more of a Microsoft Office kind of world, right? And I joined OnShape 7 years ago, and we have all these Google Docs and Google Drive, and there's like no folder structure. I'm like, where is everything? Well, all you have to do is Google it, right? I mean, you type in a search bar, and you're gonna find what you're looking for, and you're gonna get the
Yeah.
preview. You're not gonna be worried about V2, V1. Is this the right version? It's usually right there. So I agree with you. It's really a nice way of getting used to it. There's even like professors in schools saying that the students now aren't even knowledgeable about what a file system is, and like they teach them file-based applications, and the students have no idea. They look at them like doe in headlights. It's kind of crazy. So all they know is the Google type world. Cool. So another thing, we had talked earlier, and one of the things that you mentioned when evaluating which design tools you were going to need for your company moving forward, was business growth, right? If you needed to add new people, um, you needed something that promoted active collaboration, right? So maybe you could expand on that more, because you started with on-premise tools, obviously, in the world of CAD, right? So maybe
Yeah.
explain, where you kind of came from, and then how your business grew, and what the process was like to add something like OnShape.
Yeah. I, as a engineer growing up, I started in school, I learned NX. My first job, I learned Creo. And then at some point at that role, we transitioned to SolidWorks, and was in SolidWorks for, a number of years. And as Doris Dev was starting, I was the sole engineer at the time. Um, and we were bringing on actually 2 engineers. So the engineering team was tripling, and looking down the barrel of file management across those team members and file oversight, design oversight of those team members, I knew that the system that I had in place and the systems that I had grown up with as a CAD user were not going to work, or just I knew they were bad, and I had always wanted another system. And looking for a cloud tool, OnShape was that tool. It had everything we needed, and it enabled the team us to bring on those 2 new team members. They got brought in directly in OnShape before I even transitioned. So I was kind of bridging the gap a little bit. I was overseeing some of their projects, doing a little bit of work, but I had some projects in SolidWorks at the time, and it probably took me maybe only 6 weeks to fully transition projects from SolidWorks to OnShape entirely,
Okay.
and have the entire team in OnShape at that time.
So by having the team fully kind of in OnShape, once you kind of got into the pond and started using it as well, like, there were probably no more conversations about, what's the status of things and where are the files, right? You were able to kind of just go in and see things, right? And they had the same opportunity as well. I think you were mentioning how cool it is to kind of do that on a self-service basis, right? Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that in general, and we'll show some of these things live, of course. But yeah.
Yeah, I think, the team members being able to generate a file, and we're not having to deal with duplicate files, right? When you're not versioning a whole on you're not versioning a whole part studio, or like you're not duplicating and you have another part studio that's v2. It's all within a whole project will live in a single Onshape file. And so as a result, you end up with an extremely streamlined and simple top level structure
Yeah.
where effectively one project will generally get a single Onshape file. So through the entirety of the project. So it's really, really easy for any team member to create that, keep it as a source of truth ongoing, and for any other team members to jump in and see where that is, whether it's in what stage it's in, and if a new team member gets assigned to it, let's say a project needs to go through a new industrial design phase, the industrial designer knows exactly where it is, has seen what the history of that CAD file entirely, so they're able to understand, why an engineer maybe made these decisions along the way, how they built their model as well, because we're not sharing, dumb step files. These are parametric files being shared between team members. So a designer or a team member who didn't build the original file doesn't have to like reimagine or re-engineer the feature tree, because they're able to see exactly how someone did it and say, that's the smart way to do it. I'm glad they did it that way. Or they can also make the decision, I would not do it that way. I'm gonna do it from scratch, or make some modifications to the feature tree. So it's really enabled team members to hop on and off projects extremely quickly, and work with teams that both are co-located in the same office. So multiple engineers on the same project in the same office, or an engineer and designer in the same office, but also enabling our US teams to work with our Hong Kong teams as well, to work on files, to share versions back and forth, and to understand when modifications are being made and why they're being made as well.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, the Onshape document, an Onshape file, we call it like a document, and I always like to think of it as like an engineering notebook, right? You have all of the ideas and design history and comments and everything just right there. It's like the old, I can't even remember the names of them now, but the black and white modeled, notebooks. It just reminds me
Yeah.
of that a lot. And we'll show that in just a second. So like, a product like your humidifier, you could do that in a single document, and you'd have assemblies, you'd have part designs, you might have renderings, you might have other kind of things that are in there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you may be referencing files from other projects as well
All
that
right.
are extremely helpful. So, right, if we're making a version 2 of an item, or we're making a, we're building a product that has a common part in it, we're able to reference that common part from an entirely other project as well.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I mean that's where it's at. If you can reuse part numbers, that's always the best thing to do to save costs. So, yeah, so this is just a little bit more deep into the topic of the new ways you're able to work because of the cloud native architecture. You mentioned that you guys can see each other's work anytime. Everything is version controlled. Like there is no example in Onshape of you're not going to export a file to keep a backup of it or anything like that. It's just there in the history of the design, right? It's just there. You don't have to worry about it. There's no control S key you have to hit and things like that.
Yeah, you're not versioning at the end of the day anymore, which I remember those days.
That's a great way of putting it. Versioning at the end of the day. Um, yeah, it's nice having that right at your fingertips. Something that I will not take credit for coming up with this phrase because you did is this phrase: we don't have processes in place not to collaborate, right? And I think that I want to like print that sign out and put it in my office, because it's like that's like, why do you feel so strongly about that you have such a cool phrase to describe, collaboration and processes?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is just the speed at which we work in a lot of the, fast-moving consumer goods companies work. We get to work with a lot of startups that are bringing early products to market, that are bringing new products to market, it's really important for them to validate the market that they have. So they're trying to launch a product as quickly as possible. And so what's really important is that we don't go through this, very oftentimes very clean and stagnant stage gating system where you've got one person and then it slowly transitions from one team to another team to another team to another team. What the way we're built is that team assembles around a product day one, and it moves with that team all the way through until the product ships. So it's really important that people have visibility on all the products that we work on and all the changes that are being made, and it's not going through this, huge decision tree, and everyone has to go through and check a box and approve it along the way. It's really, as it moves from one stage to another, it's very important that the whole team moves with it along the entire process, and that enables us to collaborate. That requires us to collaborate the entire time.
Yeah, it's well put. And it probably helps you make better decisions quicker, would you say? In the world of Agile, it's all about finding problems sooner, failing fast is the motto, right? So have there been instances where by having this kind of collaboration process in place that you've found, I mean, I'd imagine yes, but you've found issues, much quicker, right?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of it is two things. It's finding problems sooner and making decisions faster is really, the making decisions faster is the most important thing on the product development side that we see. That it's really hard to make a decision, and it's really hard for clients to make decisions because they're oftentimes either relatively new to product development or they come from a less technical background. So visibility into the product development system can be overwhelming. And so they both require a lot of information and the right amount of information to make decisions. So giving them visibility into the design process, and these clients oftentimes have never opened CAD before, have never seen CAD before. So the ability to preview CAD files and the ability to share CAD files with them before having to make a prototype for them to then test and hold and feel, they're able to see that instantly, or we're able to make modifications while a client is, looking over our shoulder digitally, and previewing our files is extremely helpful, and we couldn't do that without OnShape.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's show a few of these things off so we can give some people some context as to what we're talking about here. So what I'll do, I'm just gonna, here I am on my Mac here. There's OnShape runs on any modern device. I run a Mac because I like to take pictures and I'm a photographer and I have all the Adobe things. So I enjoy using a Mac now. So OnShape will run on Linux, Mac, Windows PC, of course, iOS, Android, whatever it might be. What do you guys run over there, Lucas, for equipment?
Most of the team is on Mac. We have some of the engineers on PC, but it's mixed.
It doesn't matter, right? There's no infrastructure worries, right? You're able to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So to sign in to OnShape, you're simply going to a web page, in a browser. I'm using Chrome just because I like to have different colors for different profiles and things like that, just for demonstration purposes. But essentially you're signing in with a username, email address, password, or if you have our enterprise plan, you can sign on with single sign-on with your organization. So really couldn't be easier to get in. Just go to a web browser and you have all the information at your fingertips. So I'll play the role of just a couple of people to pretend, a product development process here. But we'll have Debbie, the designer in Hong Kong. We'll have Mike, the manager here in the States. And when you start using the OnShape system, as Lucas was mentioning, everything that you're shared into will show up here, right? So you sign in there, if you have access to the information, like, an admin can see everything, of course, that the entire company is doing, but, other users in the company may or may not, have that same level of access depending on how you set it up, right? So, and Lucas, feel free to just chime in anytime. Like if I'm talking about something and you have some kind of cool anecdotes, relating to that, feel free, because I want this to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So let's just jump into a design. Here's let's drill into the Agile design process here, right? So, oh, wrong button. There we are. So we have this design. It's not the sexiest design in the world, but it's a cool looking design, and it has some parts, and we can go through it, right? So when we actually, I kind of like this design. It's kind of cool to me. But anyway, let's say we need to make some design decisions relating maybe to the spacing between this handle and in the back of the the pull start here of the drill, right? Maybe there's not enough room for people with gloves or something like that when they're out in the cold, right? So if we wanted to make that design change, now I could certainly do that as Mike the manager. You can see I have all of the tools available in my OnShape toolbar, but I really want some help and advice on this, right? And I know Debbie is starting up pretty soon, and I'm going to add a comment right here to the design, and I'm going to say, hey Debbie, right? And I just at her in, right? That should be familiar if you're using any kind of anything cloud native software. This is how they work, right? I mean, you probably use this in like Google Docs and things like that, right, Lucas?
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that, I'm gonna ask Debbie, can you gotta type into the right box? This happened last time I was on a GoToMeeting. It like the typing just stopped working completely. So just let's do this. I have a backup plan. I'm going to undo this. There we are. So I already have asked this question before. Hey, Debbie, can you change the length here? Now, where? In OnShape, you can actually assign labels to like different things that you want people to look at, right? So in this particular comment, we went into the part studio for this particular portion of the handle of the drill, and we identified this surface as the face that Debbie should be interested in right here, and we even put in a little screenshot, right? So you can add screenshots, you can upload your own or make your own inside of OnShape using a quick little built-in tool. Have you tried that yet, by the way, the ability to add a comment with a live markup like this?
Yeah, we do it a fair amount. It's also, I think, one of the things that is really awesome about OnShape is just the support as well. And I think this is, the markup tool and the comments when you're talking to the support team are extremely helpful. And yeah, the contact support is amazing with OnShape, and that's one thing that before OnShape we were in SolidWorks and we had a value added seller, and you got to hit them up an email and you like have to find your account rep, and it like ends up being this like long process. But one thing that's great is in platform we can ask for help, we can send a support ticket, and in as quickly as 30 minutes we're like on a video call with a support engineer, and like they're helping us solve the problem, and they may be it's extremely helpful. It's astonishing. I think that's what really blew me away when we first onboarded, was the ability for the support team to help out the engineers that were starting, because some of them were just simple onboarding questions like, how do I do this? And other things were like, oh, there's something wrong with this. Why is there either a bug or there's a problem with the system? And they say, oh, either it was a bug and it got solved, or we were doing something wrong.
Yeah. So having that support built into the product has been quite a good thing you're saying. It's something we hear
Yeah,
all the time,
absolutely.
which, and we're really appreciative that you mentioned that, because it, if you can't, if you can't get your questions answered in a timely fashion, then, you're going to look at other things, right? So, you can just hit that contact support, share that same kind of screenshot, and even share the document with the support team. And then when the ticket's closed, it's unshared, and you're not sending files back and forth. There's no like big zip tar balls that you have to send into your evaluated reseller. I used to be one. I used to be a evaluated reseller. I knew all the horror stories, when things would break, and especially on the data management side, that's where it really got hairy, because you were asking customers to email or not email, physically mail their hard drives in for PDM support, and it was just, can't even imagine anymore. But anyway, look, so you have the commenting built in. You're able to share with people immediately, like this design, because I added that comment, it automatically provided Debbie, if I started, it would give her just view only at first, just by commenting her in. But you could obviously upgrade Debbie's rights at any point in time to the permissions that make sense at that moment. And this is a dynamic change, right? So you don't have to worry about like calling back files. If you've sent somebody files in a file-based on-premise system, you're sending files, and those files are gone. The horse is out of the barn, and you're not getting those files back, right? In OnShape, everything's a live link, and everything's kind of like a dynamic permission system, right? So if I give Debbie edit and comment, she can't make a copy. She can't share it with somebody else by accident, until the time comes. When that time comes, the permissions can be upgraded, right? So this share screen should also be something that's not surprising for any modern SaaS. I mean, this looks like most of the other sharing screens that you would see in other tools like Google Docs and things like that, right?
Yeah,
So
completely. Can you demo follow?
yeah, let's do it. So
I think
I
that's
am,
probably the coolest.
yeah. And how have you used that in your company?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a few ways. One is just engineer to engineer, being in a different place, the Hong Kong team members and the New York team members will, as they're collaborating on a file, they're trying to talk about, maybe a specific feature, or they're talking about a specific detail that they want to preserve, they want to edit, and sometimes it can be very hard to communicate that over photo, or just with a simple markup or something like that. So we use the follow me feature a lot when one person is making an edit to a file that another person wants to, either audit to make sure they're doing it right, to ensure that they're keeping the design intent true, or that the request to edit was clear, I would say. So there's a lot of use cases for it. Also with, team members or who are starting with OnShape, that training, that tool that we use during training, it makes it a lot easier to show someone how a feature tree works, what sketch is driving what features. It's a really great training tool.
Awesome. Yeah. So in this case, I've shared this with Debbie, and we've added a comment. Debbie signs in and she can get to her action items. On the enterprise plan, we kind of put them all across the top, but in the other plans, you can get it under the menu here. You'll be able to find your action items under one of these two menus. I just can't remember at the time, but you would see the list of actions. And now Debbie is literally jumping in to the same design that Mike is in. Now, of course, we've already gone way beyond what any CAD system can do already, just simply by having two people in the same document at once, right? So if you did this in on-premise software, you would only have one person that had edit, and the other person would get a message, Windows message, right? Because they only run on Windows, saying this person has this file open. Would you like to take a copy? No, I would prefer not to take a copy. So let's do this. There's the comment right there on the side, and I can click that label as Debbie. So here I am signed in as Debbie, and now Debbie and Mike are both looking at the same tab inside the same document. This document has a version history as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. but now we're looking at the same thing at once. Now, a clue that two people are looking at the same design at once is that you see the avatar of the other person joining you. And that should not be a surprise either. If you've used any other modern cloud native SaaS, that's the way they do it, right? So we're not doing anything crazy, like, like off our rocker kind of stuff here. I mean, this is what all modern cloud native programs do. It is really cool how we did it, I think. But anyway, here's the follow mode. I'm going to double click Mike, his head. I click it. And if Mike, Mike sees that Debbie the designer has started following. So if Mike rotates the model, we're seeing that live point of view. You're actually seeing a hand. Like if Mike,
Yeah, the pointer is like is so useful. I think that was a new feature that got added a few months ago, and it's great.
Yeah, I love the hand here. It's it really does a good job. It's even color coded if you really pay attention, right? Each person's avatar has a little thing, underneath it, right? So it's assigning a color to make it easy to know whose hand is whose, right? Really important in the live design review. So yeah, we didn't have to spin up a Zoom call or Teams meeting or anything like that, Hangout or anything to do this. It's just part of the system. And even as changes are made, to the design, right? So if Mike makes a change to this to make it 315 millimeters from 200 something, we're going to see that update on Debbie's screen, dynamically, right? So this is a big change. It's changing a bunch of stuff, through the feature tree. So it took a second, but that change is already, here, right? And we didn't have to refresh anything. We didn't have to like reload a document. We didn't have to like delete files, all these things you would have to do, in other on-premise systems that are not, really cloud native systems, right? So, and you can see in that version history that there was a change that was made, at this point today, when I just did this, right? That's Mike, the manager, he made that change. And I've also provided Debbie those permissions to make changes too. So we can both be editing, and Debbie might, we might be on a call or something while we're talking here. And Debbie's like, oh, we really can't go 315 because we know that we can't get that amount of tubing or whatever it is, right? So, Debbie can go back and say, okay, 300, how's that? And you're just doing this live on the fly, and we're both seeing things update, simultaneously, right? It's really and it works that way around the world, right? Just because one person's in Hong Kong and another person is in Brooklyn or wherever you might be, you don't have to worry about that. Those changes are happening dynamically. So we've made those changes. Oh, go ahead, Lucas.
Oh, there's one more feature. It's less about collaboration, but a feature I love is the final on
really
sketches
cool
or features.
I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, it's a great tool. I missed it in SolidWorks, and so glad that OnShape has it as well.
Yeah, it's really nice to make your change, see that final button, and have the rest of that Part Studio update. And the way OnShape works in this Part Studio mode, especially for a company that does like product design, where you're referencing lots of parts together, it's so nice to be able to see the whole feature tree rebuild. Like this is a feature tree with 53 features, but 8 part bodies right now, right? We have this piece of sheet metal, we have this little piece of sheet metal, this bent tube, this gusset, and here, there's this little button. These are all designed in this one part studio, 53 features, 8 parts, and the feature tree is updating pretty quick. And that final button really does give you that, confirmation that, that design change is really a good change, right? And, if the change wasn't good, I mean, it's not the end of the world, right? I mean, all I have to do is just restore back to a previous version, whenever it was, right? So you're not finding yourself saving all these like extra copies of like attempts at making design changes onto your desktop anymore. Like I've visited thousands of engineers over the years, and how many times I've seen that. Files all over the desktop for different design ideas, but I just went back 1 minute and 48 seconds in time, like Doc Brown, and just like that, I'm, back in time. So, really, having that history the version history, how are you using that at your company, Lucas? Anything special that you're doing there that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would say, one thing we don't have right now implemented is releases. So we're using versions effectively as releases as well. They're just, they're named something different, so they're easier for the team to find.
Yeah.
But for the version tree, what you often see is a designer would start a project. It'd probably live primarily with the industrial designer. They're going to go through revisions and different design versions, and maybe they'll split off into another version tree when they're doing something in parallel. So they may be designing a part that is a single part, it's a unibody part, or they also want to show a client or experiment with a multi-body part, and they'll split it off into two different versions, and they'll design it in parallel until it becomes clear that okay, there's no point for this to be a multi-bodied part. We're going to kill it. It's going to be a single part. And so they'll close that version tree and move forward with the version tree that won effectively the design challenge. And they'll make versions along the way. They're able to go back and see what was done, what worked, what didn't work. And then once it gets handed off to the engineer, they'll take on effectively from that design file and move forward, or that design version, and just continue to develop the product through that from that version. So they may rebuild it. They will likely do a lot of feature tree changes because they're optimizing for something a little different. But it enables them to learn from what the designer built, and to ensure that the designer and the engineer have visibility into parts all the way through the process, so that a designer is not hoarding something that they don't want to share with the engineering team too early, or that's people don't want to design with people looking over the shoulders a lot of the time, so it can be scary. But what it does is it builds in communication and just forces collaboration between the teams, because everyone has visibility into what everyone's doing.
Yeah. And a question that I get, and it's something that one of the attendees have asked, is the doing exactly what you were talking about, like doing the version management. Do a version on a very large project, with lots of tabs. That's creating a lot of versions. Now, it's not anything that you have to worry about as an end user, but I think it sometimes makes it clean to pull it out into its own document with its own version history if you start to use the stuff often, if it's a common item, things like that. I've gone off and created this DFM branch, from a version to make a design change, but perhaps it's better to go off on our own with a single item or a group of items as well, and I'll show you that in just a second. But being able to go off on a branch, propose design ideas, maybe let me make just one more simple change, just so we have a couple of modifications to look at here. We can do this compare function to get a diff between where we are now and when we were ready for DFM originally. Is this something that you've used, Lucas?
Yeah, it's a great tool. We love showing this to clients so they can see exactly what gets changed between maybe where a designer handed it off or where a last prototype was created that they got to see in person. Because it's very hard to talk to a client and show them, you saw this part in person and now you're seeing this just in CAD. How different are they? And this gives us a great visual of showing exactly how different something is.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. It's one of the better things available to really convey the changes, especially in your space where you're talking to non-technical people quite often. But even like this is a small change, it might be hard to pick up on that change, if you didn't have this, I think. So then the other thing that I'll show, let me just go back to the DFM branch. Let's say we want to pull this, we're going to have like 5 or 10 more different drill handle systems, and it probably makes more sense to pull it out into its own document. It's not a requirement to do that, to use it in other designs. There's no like rule against that in OnShape to, you can use this design in any other design right now as it exists. But sometimes it is nice to just move it out on its own, Right now it's in this folder called parts, well, actually, oh, this is new. It's actually pulling the whole folder up. But anyway, I'm going to move it to my like top level, here. And actually, let me just do it one more time. Move the document. Oh yeah, new document. We're going to call it handle, right? And it's going to move it into its own brand new document. Or you can move it into another document that has its own history already. So it's up to you. But as soon as you do that, it's okay. Everything's still going to work. Like if I go back to my main top level assembly, everything will be right where you left off, right? I'm not missing parts because I've moved it in an inappropriate way or anything like that. I know that happens a lot in on-premise file-based systems. If you move things inappropriately in your file system, all hell breaks loose and you have to hunt down the files again. But if I go back to my documents page, just to refresh the screen here, you'll see at the top, I have the handle right here as its own document now. And that document has its own history now all by itself. Let it refresh that now. But now I'm working on its own history. It started when I moved it out, and now I can continue doing design work in this alternate kind of document, with its own history moving forward. So pretty easy to do that. And you can always switch things around too. Like, if you wanted to replace, one handle with another, there's this replace function, and you can go in and, find another one. It's really pretty easy. And if you want to use the release manage stuff, release management is just, a version on steroids, right? It's a version. It really is a better way of explaining it without getting into anabolic steroids is getting into, it's just on my mind because of the Baseball Hall of Fame stuff. But anyway, if we look at this, where was I? I think if we wanted to explain the difference between versions and releases, a release can affect a small number of items in a document, where a version is for everything, in the document, right? So if I wanted to release just this piece of sheet metal here, because I know I'm going to send it out to a sheet metal supplier before and then I'm going to make my own bent tubing for whatever reason, I can take that bracket and I could say release it. And it's going to put it through a release. I'm using the enterprise version, so I have several different workflows that I use. But here, I could just say, okay, I'm going to stamp this at Rev A because I'm sending it out to a sheet metal supplier. Actually, it was at Rev B before, now it's going to C, and it also tells me that we've released this before under this part number. So it's giving me all this great information. When you start really getting into like high production situations, this is really a requirement, right? And then you would release this under an ECO. And I'll just give it a new part number. So there it is. ECO number A, and then the engineering team can then get a notice to approve that particular thing going to Rev C in this case. And I'll just submit it for peer review. So, this document, is going to get a version in this tree. It's a special version called a release, and it's just making, that part get that property. And then if I do a search for this, if I go ahead and release this, and I'm looking for something in the system, I would be able to go ahead and say I'm looking for a part, I'm looking for anything that's a released part. Maybe I know part of the part number or description of it, and I could just do a search for it, and it's crazy how fast this is. But there it is. There's the released version of that bracket. Here's the revision history. Here's that release. Who approved it? It was Mike. So it's like, it's another level of depth, right? When you start releasing items. Maybe, let us know if you have a chance to try that sometime, Lucas. We're happy to help out.
Yeah, need to start playing with it more.
Cool. So I want to just kind of go over any other surprises. Like, I think you mentioned a couple of these already. But adding, the follow mode was something that helped you learn about new designs. You also mentioned the walkthrough video stuff as well. which was interesting, right? So you're using what was it, Loom? I think it was another cloud
Yeah,
native
we
app,
use
right?
Loom. Yeah, we use Loom a lot to help, share either designs with clients that, can't do it live. So we'll do an async walk through video, or if we're sharing it with a supplier or we're sharing it with another team member. And it's also especially helpful for sharing it with the project managers who maybe aren't in CAD. So they're able to understand what changes are being made and what repercussions that may have
Mm.
to the timeline or to how we're sourcing a supplier. So we really love using those walkthrough videos for that.
Cool. You just upload it right as a video right to the
A
document
link,
then.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Comments are awesome as well. And then you mentioned that this helps you kind of get new design team members up to speed very quickly because you're using some of these tools kind of built into the platform.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's really the lion's share of what I had planned on going over with you today, Lucas. I really want to thank you for joining us. Are there any other things that that come to mind that maybe I forgot to bring up, or that you might be excited to bring up before we wrap things up? And if anybody has any questions, put them in the questions panel. I'll be looking at that. But go ahead.
I mean, the biggest thing for us is, as we're bringing on new team members, how quickly they can transition into OnShape, and how quickly they can start collaborating with team members. And I started in Pro E, now Creo, and then transitioned into SolidWorks, and then into OnShape. But most of our engineers, our junior engineers in school, are not learning SolidWorks or Creo or NX anymore. They're using Fusion. So it's an even easier transition from Fusion to OnShape now, for our junior team members than it was for me into SolidWorks. I mean, SolidWorks and OnShape are very, very similar, but when we talk about different mates and things like that, a lot of that's very similar, and a lot of the
The joint style mates,
like,
right? You don't have to like mate one
exactly.
face at a time like you do in SolidWorks or other CAD programs like that. But I do kind of like that in Fusion, and obviously OnShape
Yeah.
does that as well. And it's a nice kind of way of moving forward. And the schools are definitely looking at OnShape now as well. We have tons and tons of schools now using OnShape for obvious reasons, especially with the what we've been going through with the health situation worldwide. Being able to access your data anywhere, not go to a CAD lab anymore, right? To go to your
Yeah,
CAD.
I remember having to go to the library in order to download it, I think, to
Yeah,
download NX onto my computer or something like that. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, and also transitioning. I just got a new computer, and the idea of, it took me 20 minutes. To turn my computer on, put in all my credentials, get on Chrome, and be able to log into OnShape, have all of my files there. And the idea of doing that with an on-prem system would have taken me days to like make sure I had everything set up. I was talking to the right people. I would have to get reissued a license. It just sounds like it was a nightmare. I remember doing
yeah.
that.
It's a
Now,
huge amount of steps involved. I forget about that. I mean, it's ridiculous the amount of stuff that we had to go through in the past, and the cloud native stuff really does help. I don't worry about, I want to go get a new computer this afternoon. I could just go to the Apple store, go get one, and not worry about backing anything up, right? Because most of my stuff is hosted and it's all right there.
yeah. And from a liability standpoint for us, the thought of a team member losing a device with
Mm,
client assets on it is a huge scare, and we just don't have that at all anymore.
right, right. Yeah, totally. That's a really good point. The security, a lot of people will bring up the safety and security of a cloud system, when we talk to people. So, you saw a few things here today that are actually better security than what you'd have in your on-premise system, right? The way you share data, instead of sharing files, you're sharing a dynamic link with permissions that you have full control over. Everything's encrypted in OnShape, both at rest and in motion. And if somebody were to figure out how to get that transmission of data packet from where we're hosting it to your screen where it's opening in your Chrome browser, what would they do with it? It's not really a file, right? It's much more secure than CAD files. I would definitely say. And we have customers that have put us through the ringer on that, and we've passed through security reviews with flying colors. So yeah, I think let's leave it at that. I really think that this was a great discussion, Lucas. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us your thought process and your company's kind of evolution here. What was the website again for your company?
Yeah, Doris.dev, DORIS.DEV.
Okay, cool. And obviously, check out OnShape.com for looking at OnShape and getting in touch. We're happy to get people up and running with the system. We have a team of people that help people in the first part of the business, and then we have training and the internal kind of support. It's really pretty easy. So don't be shy. All right. Well, I think that's that. So one other thing that I wanted to mention is our conference coming up March 2nd and 3rd. So for March 2nd in the Americas, we have our OnShape Live event, which is a community event where we'll have all sorts of tips and trick sessions, keynotes by the executive team, Jim Heppelman, John Hirschtick. I'll have a session there. And we would love it if you could sign up. It's online. It's, for the Americas, it's March 2nd. And for the European continent, it's March 3rd. And sign up. It's completely free to sign up. And we would love to have you. We have a design competition as well. We'd love to have you. So thank you again, Lucas. And we'll see you all next time.
Thank you, Mike and Lucas, for joining us today. We appreciate you allowing us to see into the workings of your business. Thank you also to everyone who has attended today. We have a few questions that have come through. We'll follow up after the webinar to answer those directly. A recording of this webinar will be published on our website at cadalyst.com. For further information about OnShape, please go to onshape.com. Thank you and have a great afternoon.